Joseph Barboza Jr. September 20, 1932, February 11, 1976, nicknamed The Animal, was an American mobster and notorious mob hitman for the patriarchal crime family during the 1960s. Early life. Barboza was born on September 20, 1932 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to Portuguese immigrants from Azores, Portugal. Joseph Barboza Sr., born José Barboza, a middleweight boxer, and Palmita Camille, who was a seamstress. His father was from Los Angeles, California, and fought in only 2 professional boxing matches. His debut professional boxing match was against Pete Frisco on January 27, 1933, and the second match was against Carlos Chippers on April 27, 1933. Barboza had 2 brothers, Donald and Anthony Barboza, and a sister, Anne Houghton. Barboza was fluent in Portuguese, Italian, and Spanish. He was married to a Jewish woman and fathered a daughter in 1965 and also a son, and lived in Chelsea, Massachusetts while employed by the patriarchal crime family. Professional boxing career. Barboza would pursue a career as a professional light heavyweight boxer and member of the United States Boxing Association, using the name of The Baron. His first boxing match on April 18, 1949 against Rocky Lucero in El Paso, Texas, and his last fight on September 23, 1961 against Don Bale in Boston, Massachusetts. He fought with an orthodox stance. His boxing record shows Joseph as winning 8 out of the 11 matches, with 5 of them ending in knockouts. He was classified as an outfighter who is known for having very powerful punches. He was a sparring partner of patriarchal crime family associate, Americo Sacramone, future Massachusetts Auditor Joe DiNucci, Edward G. Connors, and Anthony Varenas. He later worked as a longshoreman and as a clerk in a fruit store, but always returned to crime. Escape from prison. He was first sent to prison in 1950 to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution, Concord, for 5 years. Barboza would later lead a wild prison break in the summer of 1953, which would become the largest in the prison's 75-year history. Joe and 6 other fellow inmates had guzzled contraband whiskey and pilfered amphetamine tablets, overpowered 4 prison guards, and raced away in 2 separate cars. During their furlough of freedom, they beat random people in the street, cruised the bars in Boston's Scollay Square, wandered to the neighborhoods of Lynn and Revere, and were finally apprehended at a subway station in East Boston. The escape party had barely lasted 24 hours. That November, while awaiting trial for his prison break, Barboza slugged a prison guard in the cafeteria for no reason. 3 months later, he tossed a table at a guard's chest when he entered his cell. Entry into organized crime. Barboza may have first been exposed to figures of Boston organized crime while incarcerated at Walpole. Paroled in 1958, he became a recognized figure in East Boston's organized crime circles and was a regular at a bar on the corner of Bennington Street and Brook Street, which became known among local criminals as Barboza's Corner. His crew of small-time burglars and thieves consisted of Joseph W. Amico, Patrick Fabiano, James Carnes, Arthur Brazos, Thomas DePresco, father and son team Joseph and Ronald Dermotti, Carlton Eaton, Edward Goss, and Nicholas Femio. The crew was officially supervised for the patriarchal crime family by Stephen, the rifleman, Flemmy. He was never officially inducted into the patriarchal crime family because of his Portuguese heritage, but within 8 years during the escalation of gangland warfare, he earned a reputation as one of Boston's most prolific contract killers and sidewalk soldiers. In 1964, Barboza legally changed his name to Baron. It was widely believed in law official circles that Barboza had performed contract killings for Raymond L.S. Patriarca. By January 1966, Barboza was considered a powerful crime figure in the Boston underworld. For disturbing the peace one night, he slugged a Metropolitan District Commission police officer, Joe McLean, and received a 6-month sentence. After his release from prison and his graduation from an expensive cooking school, he was shipped out on the SS President Wilson to the Orient. A few notorious victims on his murder roster included Edward McLaughlin and both Cornelius Hughes and Stevie Hughes, killed between 1965 and 1966. Barboza aligned himself with the Winter Hill Gang in part because James "Buddy" McLean was an ally of Vincent Flemmi, who Barboza trusted along with his brother Stephen Flemmi. As early as 1965, FBI agent H. Paul Rico was using that trust to drive Barboza into becoming an informant. Joe drove a 1965 Oldsmobile Cutlass, which was referred to by law enforcement as the James Bond car because it had a sophisticated alarm system and a device for making thick black smoke come out of the tailpipe. Turning government witness by 1966, he had a very turbulent position in the Boston underworld. He had been shot at while standing outside his home in Chelsea. The local authorities believed there had been other unreported attempts. Brimming with reckless power, he was not abiding to the traditional rules of La Cosa Nostra. One night he went into a nightclub that was paying Gennaro Angualo for protection and demanded that the owner make payments to him as well. By mid-1966, the unrelenting attention from the law Barboza received from the authorities only made his standing in organized crime more tenuous. In October 1966, he came to terms with his falling out with the organized crime element after he and 3 local hoodlums were arrested on weapons charges while cruising the combat zone in Boston. His accomplices were released on bail, but Barboza had his bail set at $100,000, which he could not afford. Nobody from the patriarchal crime family came down to post his bail, and he heard that it was the mafia family who tipped off the cops. 2 of his associates, Brazos and Tapresco, went to raise Barboza's bail. 5 weeks later, after raising $59,000, the pair were murdered in the Nightlight Cafe by soldiers serving under Ralphie Chong Lamattina, who served in the crew of Ilario Zanino. After relieving them of their bail money, they stuffed their bodies in the backseat of Brazos' car and dumped it in South Boston, hoping to throw blame onto the Irish gangs. However, a mob associate named Joseph Lanzi tipped the cops about the murder. On April 18, 1967, he was murdered by Jerry Angelo's enforcers Carmen Gagliardi, Frank Odoro and Benta Cristoforo. The FBI began diligent efforts to turn Barboza into an informant. In December, Joe Amico was murdered. The following month, after a 10-day trial, Barboza was sentenced to a 5-year term at Walpole on the weapons charges. In the summer of 1967, Steve Flemmi met with Joseph and informed him that Gennaro Angualo and his brothers had plans to murder him. In June 1967, Barboza turned FBI informant while in prison for murder, and eventually testified against Raymond Patriarca before becoming one of the first informants to enter the Witness Protection Program. The government told Barboza his wife and children would not be protected unless he agreed to testify. The government also promised to set him up in his own restaurant and plastic surgery to change his appearance and further protect Barboza and his family, but it did not fulfill either of these promises. Barboza went on to testify against Raymond Patriarca and many high-ranking members and associates of the New England family. On June 20th, Patriarca and Henry Tain Leo were indicted for conspiracy to murder in the 1966 killing of Providence bookmaker Willie Marfio. On August 9, Gennaro Angualo was accused of participating in the murder of Rocco DiCelio. Finally, in October, 6 men were charged with the March 1965 murder of Edward "Teddy" Deegan, who had been marked for death for several burglaries which he had committed with Stephen Flemmi, in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Shortly after the indictment of Raymond Patriarca, which drew front-page stories about Barboza as a turncoat, Barboza wrote to the Boston Herald, "All I want to be is left alone. The La Cosa Nostra was willing to pay Barboza $25,000 to quit talking. He showed some interest in the deal, raising the price to $50,000, which was agreed upon but later turned down after consulting his lawyer. Angelo was later found not guilty. Despite efforts by reporters to coax jurors to explain their deliberations, none did. 20 years later, however, jury foreman Kenneth Matthews said none of the 16 jurors had found Barboza believable, stating, "He didn't help the state at all. He wasn't reliable. He was nothing as a witness." On January 30, 1968, a bomb was planted in the car of Barboza's attorney, John E. Fitzgerald, resulting in Fitzgerald losing his right leg below the knee. After that, Barboza was moved around frequently from Thatcher Island to Fort Devens and even to the junior officers' quarters located in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Barboza owned a German Shepherd dog, and while at Fort Knox he would walk his dog with future corrupt FBI agent John Morris, who was a member of the military police at the time. In May 1968, the Deegan trial began. After 50 days of testimony and deliberations, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Found guilty and sentenced to death were Peter Lim, Louis Greco, Henry Tainleo and Ronald Casasso. Sentenced to life in prison were Joseph Salvati and Wilfred Roy French. Barboza was given a 1-year prison term, including time served. He was paroled in March 1969, under the name of Joseph Bentley, and relocated to Santa Rosa, California, where he enrolled in a culinary arts school. In summer 1970, Barboza murdered Clay Wilson. According to the FBI, this was the 26th murder of Barboza. In 1971, he pleaded guilty to a second-degree murder charge and was sentenced to 5 years at Folsom Prison. At prison, Barboza wrote poems about the American Mafia, Boston Gang War, the Mafia Double Crosses, A Cat Lives, and The Gang War Ends. Death. Barboza was released on October 30, 1975 and moved into a $250 a month apartment as Joseph Donati. He took the last name from twin brothers Richard and Robert Donati. After he was befriended by small-time South Boston hoodlum James Chalmers, Gennaro Angulo found out where Barboza was. On February 11, 1976, Barboza left Chalmers' San Francisco apartment. As he was walking to his car, he was hit by 4 shotgun blasts at close range. Although he was armed with a Colt .38, Barboza never had a chance to draw it. Barboza's attorney F. Lee Bailey said about his death, "With all due respect to my former client, I don't think society has suffered a great loss." Ilario Zannino, chief enforcer of Gennaro Angulo, was later overheard on a hidden bug saying that it was J.R. Russo who had assassinated Barboza. In the conversation, Zannino described Russo as a genius with a carbine. Barboza is buried in South Dartmouth Cemetery in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. False testimony against rivals. While working for the FBI, Agent H. Paul Rico helped to frame Joseph Salvati, Peter Lim, Louis Greco, as well as his former mob superior, Henry Tainleo, for the murder of Edward Deegan. Out of the 6 people convicted for the murder, only Ronald "Ronnie the Pig" Casasso and Wilfred Roy French were actually involved and present in the alley where the murder took place. FBI agent Paul Rico had offered French and Casasso leniency if they would corroborate Barboza's false testimony. Both French and Casasso refused the offer, and when French was threatened with the death penalty, he responded by telling Rico to warm up the electric chair. Casasso died in prison 30 years later. French was finally freed 34 years later. Winter Hill enforcer John Martorano became a government witness in 1999 after learning that both Stephen Flemmi and James Whitey Bulger were FBI informants and had been delivering information about the Mafia and the Winter Hill Gang to them. In his plea agreement, he told the Drug Enforcement Administration agent that Barboza had admitted to lying about the men convicted of killing Teddy Deegan. Martorano also revealed that Vincent Flemmi had admitted to murdering Deegan. Tainleo and Greco died in prison after serving almost 30 years. and Salvati and Lim 1 were finally released in 1997 and 2001, respectively. The families of Greco, Tame Leo, Salvati and Lim 1 filed lawsuits totaling in excess of $1 billion filed against the federal government. In July 2007, U.S. District Judge Nancy Gertner in Boston found the Bureau helped convict the four men and the U.S. government was ordered to pay $100 million in damages to the four defendants. Victims. See also: List of prison escapes, List of unsolved murders. References. Further reading: Sherman, Casey, 2013. Animal: The Bloody Rise and Fall of the Mob's Most Feared Assassin. Boston: Northeastern University Press. ISBN 978-1-55553-822-4. Messig, Hank, Barboza, Joe, 1975. Barboza. O'Neill, Gerard, Lair, Dick, 1989. The Underboss: The Rise and Fall of a Mafia Family. ISBN 978-0312026-196. Ranelli, Ralph, 2001. Deadly Alliance: The FBI's Secret Partnership with the Mob. ISBN 978-038081139. Teresa, Vincent, 1973. My Life in the Mafia. ISBN 978-0385027-182. External links: Mackenzie, Phoebe, September 30, 2008. Joseph the Animal Barboza. Find a Grave. Retrieved May 12, 2020. Joe Barboza. Box Rec. Retrieved May 12, 2020. Jones, Tom L. January 11, 2012. Joe Barboza. Boston Barbarian. Gangsters Incorporated. Retrieved May 12, 2020. The Exonerated. November 22, 2008. Archived from the original on June 22, 2008. Retrieved May 12, 2020. Via Wayback Machine.